Hello, and welcome back to Entirely English and our series on British superstitions. Today is the penultimate episode, and we are looking at gardening. So I guess this is a bit of a niche one. A lot of our viewers won't have gardens because people tend to live more in flats now, or as people incorrectly call them, apartments. So some people have is window boxes. Although some people might have allotments. I think there might be particularly English or British allotments. I'll do an extra video, not on superstitions, but on allotments explaining what they are. But for the moment, consider them as gardens not attached to your home. All right, so superstitions regarding gardening. There are a lot of superstitions looking at plants, different flowers. And rather than go through all of them, there's so many which are about bad luck. I'll put a little scrolling thing at the bottom which you can look at your leisure. But briefly, foxgloves, lilac, dandelions, hawthorn, white flowers of any kind, and fruit tree blossoms can be regarded as unlucky if you bring them into the home. The fruit tree blossom one, I think, is more like one of those pieces of superstition which are actually there to govern your life. Because if you pluck the flowers from the fruit tree, obviously they won't become fruit. So that's the bad luck. You lose some of the fruit. Or perhaps people who have orchards spread this rumor, as opposed to saying, don't pick our flowers. And parsley is a particularly interesting one. As they say, it should only be planted on Good Friday, then you'll get a good crop. And it should only be planted by women. There is an addition to that where people say it should only be planted by pregnant women. Anyway, have a look at the list at the bottom. And if you have any questions, pop them in the comments and we can look at these things in more detail for you. Now, it may be peculiar, but there is a superstition or a belief that stolen plants grow better than any other plant. It actually, I think, connects to this idea that you should also never thank somebody for giving you a plant. The superstition being that if you thank somebody, the plants won't grow or won't grow very well. So you should get into the habit of saying something like, oh, this will look very nice with the hydrangeas, or I will be sure to plant this in a sunny place. Something positive, but never thank you. Perhaps that's where the stealing idea comes from. Instead of giving somebody a plant, you put it down on the ground and then look away, and they can take it. So there's no thank you necessary. Trees play a big part in gardens as well. The elm tree was believed by the Celts and the Druids to have very strong powers, as they believed the elm tree marked the entrance to the underworld. And in a similar vein, in medieval times, there were 2 elm trees in London that were used for hanging, so it gave the tree a very dark reputation. It's also notable that the elm wood is very popular for making coffins from. So a lot of dark imagery with the elm tree there. Many people will not have it in their garden if they can help it. Another tree worthy of note is the yew tree, often considered very bad luck.
Yew? I thought you said that the yew was the tree of death.
It is, but it's also known as the tree of new life. Creepy, isn't it?
Contrarily, the mighty British oak is a symbol of British strength and resilience, and the ancient people of Britain believed that the tannin from the oak had medicinal properties. It could heal many different things. In fact, we have a proverb that goes, "From little acorns mighty oaks do grow." So the oak tree is one of the biggest trees in Britain, and its seed is just that little acorn. And harking back all forward to fairy folk, because we will come to them in more detail later, the acorns were very popular in association with the elven folk. It's a little cup that goes over the bottom of the acorn was often depicted as a hat on the fairy folk, or they would drink out of them as cups. So there's a lot of mysticism around the oak tree. The oak tree is very revered, and you would bring misfortune to you and your family if you chopped one down. Although, obviously, a lot of them were chopped down. But the ancient folk wanted to maintain the oak tree, keep it strong, keep it as this symbol of strength and health and vitality. And in the boughs of the oak tree, that the place where the trunk meets the limb, the bough, the arms, if you like, of the tree, is where mistletoe grows. And obviously these days, most people know of mistletoe as this thing you have at Christmas time. You hold it over your head and the person with you has to kiss you. That belief started again back in the Middle Ages, when it was believed that any woman that refused to kiss a man under the mistletoe was, in some beliefs, doomed to not have love for a whole year. Other people say if a woman refused to kiss under the mistletoe, she would grow into an old maid, a spinster, a woman who would never marry. We have mentioned in a previous video the festival of Beltane, and the Scots during the festival of Beltane would eat nettles, boiled nettles. It sounds horrible, and my father used to cook this, and it is pretty horrible actually. It's kind of like furry cabbages. Not very pleasant, but they believed that it was a symbol of good luck and eating the nettle would grant you good health. Now, they were a bit ahead of their time because modern nutritionists do recognize that the nettle has more iron in it than even spinach. So it's very good for your blood. So if you're feeling a little bit anemic or something, boil up some nettles. My father always said the head of the nettle, the little bit at the top, you pluck that, not the rest of the leaves because they were too hardy. You pluck the top and it takes a long time to get enough for a meal. But you pluck the top and you boil it for quite a long time. And incidentally, they also used the water that came from the nettle as a dye. It was a good, strong green dye. Now, getting into the fairy folk, as we have discussed in previous videos, the fairy folk can bring you good luck. They can also be very mischievous. They're a bit like children. They don't really have a conscience as such. If you're nice to the fairy folk, they are more likely to do you favors, to bless you. If you ignore them or attempt to harm them in any way, their wrath can be very bad, very dangerous. The Celtic people believed that thick clusters of thistles signified an area where fairies played or lived. So if a patch of thistles sprouted in your garden, you should not chop it down because then the fairies would become angry and you would need that iron horseshoe on your front door to protect your home. But this was a very strong belief with the Celts, and it's probably why the thistle is the national plant of Scotland, their emblem. Now back to the Victorian era, and yes, we're back there again. This is where a lot of superstitions were kind of solidified in the British culture. And this is still very true today. People would make a fairy garden in their gardens. They would develop a patch of ground as a fairy garden to attract the fairies to bring good luck to the home. Nowadays, some people do it because they believe, some people do it because it's a nice little sort of folly to have. So they would plant thistles, they would plant certain flowers like the foxglove that we had in the thing below because the fairies like those. The belief being that if you developed one of these areas, the fairies would be attracted to your home and stay with you and protect you. Hopefully. And certain plants, as we've mentioned, also ferns and lilies, mosses, were very attractive to the fairies and sure to bring them to your garden because they provided shelter and a magical atmosphere. So the fairies would come and bless you in some way, protect you. The fairies were also drawn to sparkly objects, a bit like magpies. Something shiny would attract them. So again, it became very popular in Victorian Britain to have a gazing ball in your garden. This was thought to attract good luck and prevent bad luck, or to attract good fairies to your garden and repel the bad ones, the hobgoblins and those sorts. And again, with the superstitions, my father was from Ireland, I think I mentioned before. And when we made a pot of tea, there were 5 of us in the family. So we had one of those big teapots, and he put like 3 to 4 handfuls of tea in it when he made a brew. And before you poured the tea in the cups, you would pour some down the drain. They would say this was a bit for the fairies before you served yourself. When you think about it, it also enables you to see if the tea was brewed enough, if it was strong enough to put in the cups. But the superstition was, poured some down the drain and the fairies could help themselves to it. A little sacrifice to the fairies. Likewise, when tea was finished, my father would rinse the pot under the tap and then take it out and throw the dregs of the tea at the bottom of the garden. The bottom of the garden is normally where the fairies live, not close to the house, at the end of the garden. So again, you throw the tea out for the fairies. And obviously this is tea leaves, not tea bags. Fairies have no truck with tea bags. Now, we all know about scarecrows. We often see them in films, in farms. There was a belief that if you gave the scarecrow a hat, you would have a better harvest that year.